FOTL. Whew, 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 whew. Just ask for trap dreams for a richer million. I ain't even have to try.
All right, welcome back to another episode of One Life to Live with Dr. Coach A. Again, I appreciate everybody for tuning in tonight. I've got someone that I truly look up to, someone that has been a great resource, a great asset to me, somebody that has played football at one of the most prestigious high schools or highly, regarded high schools here in the state of Georgia, at Lowndes High School. Spent some time coaching at the college level, was a GA down at Valdosta State, was a head coach over at Walnut Grove, and has been an assistant over at Brookwood High School. He is the current offensive coordinator at Brookwood High School. A couple of his accolades include being the Tally Johnson Assistant Coach of the Year and a Parker Resources Assistant Coach of the Year. This is a man with two young children, Mr. Hudson and young Truett, and he is also married. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like for you all to welcome my man Lance Fendley. How you doing, Lance?
Doing good, baby. How are you?
Man, I'm good. I can't complain. I was sitting around thinking and going through people that I would just like to sit and have conversations with and thinking about what to talk to them about. And you were somebody that I know is very organized. I know that you are a great person when it comes to managing time and things like that. So I knew you would be somebody that I could lean on and kind of help people from that regard. So
Absolutely.
yeah, definitely. So first thing I want to get into is I want people to get to know you, and really in the piece of getting to know you, tell everybody where you're from.
So I'm from Valdosta, Georgia. I went to Lowndes High School and did a little bit of college at Valdosta State, and then I ended up graduating from the University of Georgia. But I'm from Valdosta. Went to elementary school there, middle school there, and high school there. Went to like you said, Lowndes High School, and it's a lot different now than it was whenever I was there. It was still pretty big, but nothing to the state it is now with their all their turfs, everything's turf down there now, and the indoor and all that stuff. But it was still a special place growing up there and being there. And I tell people, like, I knew what football was. I grew up in a football family.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather was a coach, and my family was a traditional, Southeastern family where, like, we watch football on Saturdays and things of that nature. And so I knew what football was, but it wasn't until I got into middle school and started seeing, like, the tradition of, the guy that I went into high school going to be the player under was Milt Miller. And Milt Miller is a Georgia high school legend. Like, there's stadiums named after him. I mean, he was an unbelievable person, but I got to experience kind of what people envision when they watch, like, Friday Night Lights or something like that. Like, that's kind of what it was. I mean, he would come to, like, middle school games, and, man, everybody was toeing the line and chin up, and there's Coach Miller, and he would walk by and, say hey and things like that. And so you got a chance to feel what it was really like. And then you get into high school and you get to experience that side of things and the tradition. And, I mean, everything you can imagine a South Georgia town being like. I mean, people start tailgating at 5 o'clock on a Friday night. I mean, like, there's people in the park, like, people always ask me about, like, what's the Lowndes Valdosta thing like? And I tell them, like, it's real. People start lining up on Monday at the ticket office to the Board of Education to get tickets, and, like, they'll sell out by Wednesday. And at least that's how it used to be. And, like, as players, they'd be like, hey, we're going to give you 2 tickets. And if you're not using them, you've got to let us know, and you got to give them back. That way they can go and sell them and things like that. They would have to bring in extra bleachers from the Air Force Base. I mean, it was the whole 9 yards. And so it was cool to grow up in that environment. It was cool to experience that. And it kind of, even though I wasn't as serious about football then, obviously, as I am now, it really showed, looking back on it, I can reference it a lot to show me, like, that there's a reason why that place was so successful. There's a reason why people kind of lived and died on how they did. And, I remember we got a new coach my sophomore year and Randy McPherson, who was also another legend. And we went 8-3, and people were, I mean, like holding signs in the stands, yard sale signs in his driveway. I mean, everything that people see on TV and think is like a joke. It's not a joke. It really isn't. Like, that's how things go down there. And I was actually thinking about this the other day, and I thought about sharing it. Like, it was kind of one of the things I go back to. It was like everybody thinks that it's all about the coaches and the community. It was the players too. It was the pride that they took in the program. I'll never forget this. I was a freshman quarterback, and in those days, your fall scrimmage was like a jamboree. So the freshmen played at 5, and then the varsity JV played at 7, and the varsity would play like the first half, JV finish out the game kind of thing. And I remember we were walking out of the locker room to go to the game. The freshman team was, and there was this big old offensive lineman senior, and he looked me dead in the face and he said, "Don't mess this up." And I was like, okay, and which I proceeded to go out there and mess it up quite badly. But it was one of those things where it was like, man, it would the people in the town, the coaches, was the least of your concern. It was the players who had been there and who took pride in that place. And it didn't matter if you were a freshman quarterback or a third stringer in JV. Like they expected everybody to perform. From the top of the organization, from the coaches to the leadership on the team it was a standard held by everybody. And it was one of those things. It was kind of, at the time, it scared the daylights out of me. I didn't know what to think, but looking back on it, I was like, man, that is so cool. Like that guy took that much pride in that program. And it was a kid that had served 4 years in that organization, and, it meant something to him. So that's kind of a snippet into what it was like in growing up in South Georgia and playing football and things like that.
No, and that was like, my next question, because, oftentimes you hear people talk about the small town feel, right? Yeah. And then you also get the comparisons of the North Georgias and the South Georgia or the Middle Georgias and all the rest of that. Yeah. But how special, how special was that playing football in South Georgia, in that town, in Valdosta? Like, how special was that?
It was very special. I was not a very good player. They're making no bones about it, but being associated with the program and going through, everybody got treated the same, like whether you were the star quarterback or whether you were just a lonely, kid on the bench. Everybody had to do the exact same thing. The lifting was the same, the running requirements, the grade requirements, like everything was streamlined, and everybody was held accountable. And, I tell the people the biggest difference is that, Lowndes County itself is a massive area. Like the square footage of the county is huge. The only difference between that and like a Gwinnett or a Cobb is that they just only have one high school. And there's a lot more land than there is people, whereas opposed to Gwinnett counties, for instance, there's a lot more people than there is land. So it was one of those things where, like, I think that's what made it so special, was that it was a one-trick town. It's like that was it. You had Valdosta on the other side. And the thing that's crazy, I don't think people realize this a lot, Lowndes High School is actually in Valdosta city limits. Valdosta High School is actually in Lowndes County. So you could live right down the road. And this is way back in the day, before anybody got real smart about like transfer and stuff like that. But it was one of those things where, like, you could live right next door to that school. But if you were zoned to go play at Lowndes, or you were zoned to go play at Valdosta, and so like I knew guys that lived 5 seconds from Lowndes High School that they went to Valdosta High School, and vice versa, and things of that nature. So I think that was what made it so special, was that there was two entities in that town, and it was truly like an Auburn, Alabama house divided type thing. Like you either wore black and yellow or you wore crimson and silver. And there was no sitting on the fence of any kind. And it was even so much to where I remember in 2003, Valdosta was playing Camden for the state championship, and the Valdosta was on the side of the bracket that was actually going to host the state championship. Two legends. Rick Darlington was the head coach of Valdosta High School, and Jeff Herron was the head coach of Camden. And I remember me and my dad we were somewhere, and I had my Letterman jacket on, and these group of guys like stopped us, and they were like, young man, who's going to win the state championship? And they were Valdosta High School guys. and they were like, be honest, like who's going to win? Who's going to win the game? And I remember my dad was like, come on, let's get out of here, type of thing. But it was one of those things where like they were asking, but I think they were also too like, hey, guess who's in the state championship and who isn't type thing, but it was, I mean, it was. I mean, when football season ended, I swear, I know it wasn't on purpose, but it seemed this way. The day football season ended, all 4 years I was in high school, that following Monday, it was guaranteed raining, cloudy, like the most miserable day, and it never failed. And it didn't matter if we lost in the first round or the semifinals or the quarterfinals. I mean, it was just when football season ended, it was like there was a special aura around the town. It was like, hey, like it's over. Like I guess now we gotta pretend to care about the other sports until
fall come back around.
And then it was crazy too. Like I remember doing spring football like in February because they wanted to go ahead and get it in and get it done before baseball season went into effect and track and so on and so forth. Like I remember vividly doing spring football in early February to go ahead and get it in and get it done before the other sports started. And then it was, I mean, everywhere you went, if you had something on, like people knew it, people recognized it, and they knew what you were, and it was never how you doing, what you been up to, how's the team going to be, how are y'all going to be this year, what are y'all looking like this year, and it wasn't just a random person that you knew. It could be somebody you had no idea who they were. They were going to ask like, hey, how are the Vikings going to be this year, and and they were kind of anticipating an answer. Like it wasn't just like a, hey, how you doing type thing. It was, they really wanted to know, like, what are y'all going to be like? So,
right.
I think that right there is kind of what drove the special feeling of being in that and playing in that environment. And just even as a guy that wasn't very good, like I thrived off of it. I mean, it was
take pride in it. That's
you did, man. I was very self-aware. Like I knew what was in front of me. Like, we ran a triple option. We ran wing T when I was in high school. And I was really good at reading it, and I would pull it and go get 4 or 5 yards. And then the kid that come in behind me, he'd breathe the exact same way, but he would get 12 to 15 yards. And so I kind of saw the writing on the wall really quick of like, hey, this is that guy's a little bit better than I am at this thing. But I still took pride in it. I mean, I was much better probably at other sports, but I loved that whole thing. Like I loved the community. I mean, like that was still back in the day where like we would go to team camp as a team away from that. Oh yeah, man. Like, and all you had was, the guys that you knew. They would always room you with somebody that you didn't know to kind of like give you that, build that camaraderie and build that community and things of that nature. And you'd go out there, man, and you beat the mess out of each other for 2 hours, and then you'd have to sit next to each other and eat lunch or eat dinner, and it was the whole 9 yards. And but I mean, looking back, that was cool, man. That was so much fun, and a lot of the things that I keep with me to this day are things that I learned in that environment of how to persevere, how to be able to really rely on people, and what it felt like to have others rely on you as well.
Definitely. But so I want to word this the right way, because I don't want to be, disrespectful to, what's happening now. But from where we've come from and the things we've seen and how the game has been played, and like you said, there is that sense of community that you grew up playing and having, and that pride in. I went to elementary school here. I know I'm going to this high school. Like there's a ton of pride in that. Do you still think that that's something that's prevalent like right now?
I think it's relative to the area. I think in a place like Lowndes County in South Georgia, where in Gwinnett County you can't throw a rock without hitting another high school. Look at our situation; we got one literally 5 seconds from us. But in that town, but I think that just like anything else in society now, as media has grown, so has the window of opportunity, so to speak, is how I would phrase it. In that, I think there is still some of that, because you still have the generation I think people in our bracket or the last of it was like, we still remember what that was like. Of you went to Hayward Middle School, like funneled into Lowndes High School, and there was no other option. It was not like, hey, I'm gonna go to Cook County High School, or I'm gonna go to I'm going to go to the Tiff County High School or Adel or something like that. I mean, it was, no, I'll go to Hayward Middle School. I'm going to go to Lowndes High School, and that's all there is. And so I think that it's different in an environment like that, as opposed to a Gwinnett County or a Cobb County or a Fulton County, where you've got options and you've got things like that, and so many different opportunities. But I guess to go back to the originality of it, I think the originality of your question, I think that it's salvageable, but it's an uphill climb. It really is. I think that the more, and there's nobody to blame except for the governing organizations. Like, I think that if somebody would have stood tall a long time ago, and not now. I mean, this ship sailed as far as I'm concerned.
I was about to say it's over.
Yeah. But if somebody would have stood tall a long time ago and said, hey, no, where you're zoned is where you're going. And I know that may not be popular, and people are going to hear that and say this guy's a clown. But
I say it all the time. So.
I believe it, though. I think if somebody would have stood tall a long time ago and said, "Hey, this is how it is. This is you're zoned here. That's where you're going to go to school. If you and your family have to move for a legitimate reason and not just go buy a house, like a legitimate reason." Then obviously then that there's circumstances that override it, but I think that mistake was made a long time ago, and I think that that's something we're just gonna have to deal with, even, and I think that's still gonna happen in small towns too. Look at like a Tifton. I mean, they've got surrounding counties around them where it's not that hard to go to Ashburn and go to Turner County, or even go down to Adel and go to Cook County. It's not that hard. So I think that it's an uphill climb to get it back to the relativity of like, hey, I'm going to take pride, and I started as a Bobcat, and I'm going to end as a Bobcat, type thing.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So what made you in that environment want to coach ball? Like, what made you say, all right, that's what I want to do?
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a couple different things. I had I think he's currently the athletic director at Lowndes. His name was Danny Redshaw. He was my 9th grade offensive coordinator, and he's probably more respected as a baseball coach than anything. He won a few state championships, coached like the Georgia 18U team. Like, he's big time baseball. But he was my 9th grade offensive coordinator, and I had never played quarterback a day in my life. I got to 9th grade. There was a kid that was in 9th grade. He was really good, and they went ahead and bumped him up. So the 9th grade team had no quarterback, and they asked can anybody throw? And I had been a pitcher in baseball. Like, I'd been a catcher. Like, I had a good, decent arm. And so I raised my hand, and they kind of taught me a few things. And I mean, those first couple months, brother, were brutal. I mean, I didn't know whether to turn left or fall back. I mean, I really didn't. I was, and bless that man's soul, he stuck with me, and he just like, it was growing pains. I think we were like right at 500 that year. It was like 3-3 or something like that. And but he allowed me to gain confidence in myself. And I remember that spring was when we had the coaching change, and I went out that spring and had a really good spring. Like, the spring game, I was like 7-8 for 100 some odd yards, and a touchdown and some first downs and things like that, and had a really good, felt good about myself coming out of spring practice. I was like, hey man, like, maybe this is something I can be good at. Yeah. And then like I said, we switched to a wing tee, and I realized really quick that was not going to be the role for me. But that he kind of opened my eyes. He was the start of it. And then, as my high school career went on, I had people like Rob Armstrong, who is big into, he's a Florida, Georgia guy. He's coached for a long time. Coach McPherson was very influential. And just there was just something about football, man. Like, I can't explain it. I try all the time to explain it to people, man. It was a drug that I couldn't get enough of. It really wasn't. I mean, it was something, man. Like, it was the craziest thing to explain to people, because I wasn't very good, but I could not get enough. I mean, I just lived and died on everything. And then I started to see how these guys naively, let me start out by there. I started naively saw like the life that these guys were living. I was like, man, what a great and what a fantastic job. You get to go coach football, and that you get, and then they're going to pay you for it, and you get to do all this, and you get to be at the forefront of things. And it was crazy. Like, I originally in high school, I started out when you got to that time frame where it's like thinking about what you want to do. I wanted to be in the FBI. That's what I really wanted to do. And then I found out you had to go to law school and all that jazz. And
so much extra stuff.
Yeah. And academics at the time were really a high priority, So when I realized all that, I said, man, I think I'd like to coach. And I mentioned my grandfather before. He was a very important person to me. He really was. He was a Renaissance man. He was kind of the jack of all trades. But he was a football coach at the start of his life, and he was a high school coach and a college coach and things like that. And him and I were talking one day, and I said, I think I want to try this. And man, he just lit up like a Christmas tree. He was like, man, that's a great job, and that's a great profession. It's a great life. And there was one other guy, I don't want to forget him. His name was Randy Hill, and he passed away not too long ago. He was a defensive backs coach at Lowndes High School for forever. Excuse me.
Okay.
And he was also my golf coach. And him and I were this shows you how long ago it was. He actually drove me to a golf tournament, like in his own personal vehicle, which has got the most taboo thing in the world nowadays.
Yeah.
But him and I were driving down the road, and I was talking. He said, well, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, I think I want to coach football. And he kind of same thing lit up, man. He was like, man, he's like, it's a great life. It really is. He's like, you never work. He's like, it's not work. He's like, it's so much fun. And, and then it was, I think the biggest thing was that, and then kind of getting my start. Like, I tell people all the time, like, it's probably not the most fun thing, but I can honestly say, I wasn't born on third base in the coaching profession. My first coaching job was at the Boys and Girls Club in Valdosta, Georgia. And I coached the 6th grade Hayhire Vikings, and I was like the wingbacks coach or something like that.
Oh,
yeah. And that probably solidified it all right there. Cause I mean, that was something where those kids couldn't tie their shoes. They could barely, understand what you're talking about, but just seeing that feeling that I got, where it was like when you did get something right and you saw the hard work pay off, it was like, I mean, that just kind of put a stamp in it right there. I mean, it really did. And so all those guys that I mentioned, and Coach Redshaw, Coach Hill, Coach Armstrong, my grandfather, like, they were the ones that kind of were the leaders of me kind of get into it. And then my actual first thing in the coaching profession was kind of like the seal. And I mean, I was done after that. It was like, all right, well, how do I advance this ladder as quickly as I possibly can?
Yeah. And we talked about that. It was before a game, or maybe we were ending practice one day.
Yeah.
And we were having a conversation with the kids of like, we look crazy. The fact that we enjoy doing it for so little, but the feeling that we get, like in those moments of, seeing a kid who struggling, but used football to get to graduation. Seeing a kid who scores a touchdown on a Friday night in a rivalry game, like those are moments and those are feelings that, like, I mean, I don't do drugs, but I'm pretty sure like that's what it feels like.
Yeah, that's why I refer to it, and then people always kind of stop and look at me. But like football to me, like that's what it is. I mean, it's something where it's like once I got a taste of it, it was like, man, I can't get away from that. That was high. Yeah, that was a feeling, like being in that environment, and like even further more so like into the coaching aspect of it is like putting a plan together, practicing it, watching it develop, and then seeing it come to fruition on Friday night. It's like, oh my gosh, like next, yes, let's do it again. Let's do it again. Even on the ones, even in that doesn't have anything. And this is a conversation for later, but it's like, it had everything to do with winning or losing. Like it could be, that could happen and we could lose, and I can still thrive off of that. And it's like, hey, I saw that. I saw what happened. Let's go back to it. Let's get back after it. Let's go try to do it again.
Yeah, I mean that was how we felt after game 1 last year. We were like,
Yeah.
yeah, we got some stuff.
Yeah, we got some more.
Yeah,
We got
we
some.
got a bag we can dig in.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
exactly, definitely. So now talking a little bit of schedule and organization, right? And
Mhm.
I know that you coached in college for a little while. And what was that like? What was that like coaching in college?
Oh man, it was the greatest thing ever. It really was. It really was. And I mean, it's so crazy to think back of the time frame, like the just like you know, it's one of those things where like when you're in it, you don't think about it.
Yeah.
But once you're out of it, you're like, oh my gosh, man, like that was crazy how we lived. And you know, when I was graduating from Georgia, like I said, I wanted to do everything I could to try to get into college coaching. I mean, I sent out had to have been 60 letters to just anybody, and I was so naive. I didn't know anybody. That was what was so crazy. I didn't know anybody. Like the thinking back of what I did, I'm just like, what an idiot. Like I didn't know these people. They didn't know me. I was just they were just getting random emails from some guy, and you know, that they and a few of them would respond and be like, hey, we don't have anything at this time, you know, that generic answer. But I had a tie into Valdosta State. I was from Valdosta, you know, knew some people there. And I went in and I got my foot in the door and interviewed. They said, hey, job's yours as long as you get into graduate school. I remember I left the head coach's office, went straight to the register and said, have I been accepted yet? And they said, yeah, you just got accepted. Left there, went right back to the head coach's office, said, hey, they just told me I was accepted. He said, all right, we'll see you Monday morning. And little did I you know, it's one of those things where you think, you know, you have no idea. You have no idea. Like I thought that I knew football. I thought that I was a grinder. I had no idea. I had no idea. And I got in there, man, and like, you know, the first week I was there was like that was back when they did camps, and they had a 7-on-7 tournament. And man, like that whole week I was like, I don't think I slept at all. I mean, it was painting fields, it was pizza delivery boxes. I mean, it was making sure that you watched them in the hotels. I mean, it was or the dorm rooms. I mean, I was like, I got done with that week. I was like, well, I have not coached one down of football, and I'm exhausted. But at the same, but it was also like it was a great viewpoint. It was like we had all that going on, but then it was also we were still doing install with the incoming freshmen, and we were still, and I was trying to learn this system because they hired me to be the running backs GA. Well, it was Division II football. Our head coach, David Dean, he was the running backs coach. And so I was basically like the GA to the head coach. And so we ran a spread system. Well, in that system, and the running back was everything. I mean, he obviously had to know the run game. He had to know protection, and he had to know where he fit in the route concepts. And so it was probably the best thing that could ever happen to me. Like I look back, I think I originally wanted to do wide receivers. Like everybody has this thing they want to do, but then, you know, when you get an opportunity like that, it's like, I don't care what it is, you know? And so it was, that's how I got into it. And that's how, and like I said, that's how I got my start in learning it. And that first year there was growing pains. It really was, man. Like me trying to figure out how to manage that life and how to, you know, what it was going to take and just really doing everything I could, like for what I lacked in knowledge, I was able to make up for in work ethic. And I told myself, like, you hear all those stories about, you know, go get the coffee and this, that, and the other. Yeah. And there was a little bit of that, but for the most part, it was, you know, go find work. Like they're not even going to pass up work. It was like, hey, find a way to make yourself stand out. Find a way to make yourself be, you know, to where like they don't have to, like they're not looking for somebody. They're coming to come find me the next time. And like that was kind of my goal at the beginning. Like, and when I got to be the running back coach, I inherited like two guys that were basically like returning All-Americans. Like they knew way more than I did. And so me coaching them was kind of laughable at times. But I also I made it a point where I was like, I'm going to be able to give them a nugget of some kind. I'm going to give them something. And I never forget we were we were playing Albany State, and our running back, his name was Ronnie Nelson. I think he's the offensive coordinator at Daugherty County High School down in Albany now. Great player, great guy. And I remember I said something to him, and I can't remember exactly what it was, and it went out, and it happened in the third quarter. I said something to him at halftime. It went out, it happened in the third quarter, and that was one of those moments again where it's like, I remember he pointed at me on the sideline. Oh, I could have died. I was like, oh, man. I was like, I helped him. I helped Ronnie right then and there. And so, probably the thing that I took away from the most of it was that I got to learn football. I was surrounded by the people that were in that building. Where they're at now, it's laughable. Like, we got guys that are, several of them are Power 4 coaches now, making, just crazy amounts of money, and living a life that, like, it's amazing to think that we all sat in an office together at one point in time. And so just learning and being a sponge. And one guy that I always mention in our office that was a huge impact on me, his name was Seth Wallace. He's he's co-DC and assistant head coach at Iowa right now.
Yes. Okay.
And he was one of the best in the world, man. Like, he was stern. He was far, it was no nonsense. He was a true Midwest kind of guy. You take that for what you will. That's the best way I could describe him. He was pure Midwest. And he was unbelievable, man. Like, and he was a guy where, like, he could see my work ethic, but he could also see that I didn't know nearly enough about football. But he was also going to be one of those guys where it was like, he wasn't going to go out of his way. Like, if you needed his help, you need to go ask. And so I remember after my first year, there was some transition where I was going to take over the running backs full time. And I remember I went to him and I said, hey, I need to learn more ball. And he said, I'll give you 1 hour a morning during the summertime. And then Division II, like in the summers in most colleges, like at that time, there was times where, like, guys would basically say, like, hey, I'm taking 2 weeks off. I'm taking a week off. Like, they're like the office was never full. He said, I'll give you 1 hour every morning, and you can come in here, and you got from 7 to 8 to talk ball with me. And then at 8 o'clock, I got stuff to do. I got work to do. And so I would come in every morning. We'd drink coffee, and I'd get them to teach me coverages. I'd get them to teach me defensive fronts, fits, techniques, positions, like special teams. Wow. What gave them trouble. Like, at that point, I'd had a little bit of a grip of offense. And, like, I'm a big believer, like a lot of people say this, like, you need a coach on the other side of the ball to learn it. Well, that, to me, that time frame, that summer, that was what that was. I didn't actually coach on defense, but I got to pick the brain of a really smart defensive coach, and got to ask him, like, why this, why that, why are y'all doing it this way? What are y'all looking at when you do it this way? How are you disguising that, so on and so forth? And it was an education. It really was. It was a doctorate in football is what the whole thing was. It really was. And so that led into that next season where we weren't as good, but I felt like I had more to give. I had way more to go. And, just like now, they used to nag at me all the time because I was always Charlie Go Hustle. I was always, I'd put together like these tip sheet booklets for the running backs, and they would always be like, man, just run the football. Like, like, they would always give me a hard time. And like, I'd have everything in there, like tips, quotes, reminders. The whole, every new play drawn up, everything that they could possibly need. Because I was at that time, I was on the mindset, it was like, if they're going to mess up, it's not going to be because they don't know what to do. And it was just something where I got into that rhythm and it never left. And I got in and I picked up things from coaches about how they manage their business, from recruiting to, class checks, the whole 9 yards. There were so many aspects of things that a division coach in football has to do that people don't ever think about. They've got to wear multiple hats. Your equipment guy, golf tournament guy, shuttle bus guy, like the whole 9 yards. And so really kind of seeing like how you take all of that, all the extras that you have to do in Division II football is no different than being a teacher in high school sports. There's so many other things besides football that you have to worry about and do.
Oh yeah.
you've got to manage your time appropriately. The only difference in high school football and college football at Division II is that there's no real hours. You know what I'm saying? Like there's no they don't have a time frame for you. Like there's not a guy sitting there saying, hey, we need to get out of here. It's like, all right, this needs to be done, make sure it's ready, kind of thing. And so that whole, like all that right there made that experience unbelievable for me. And it was fantastic. And I learned so much during those 2.5 years. I can't put a price on it. It was it kind of made me into the way that I am now. And, going back to Coach Wallace, not only did he teach me football, but a lot of the organizational stuff is what I learned that from him as well, of, don't be sloppy, know where things are at.
Yeah.
One of the big things he taught me that I think is what helps me is like always be 2 steps ahead, anticipate what's going to come next. If you know that you've got something down the road 2 weeks, don't wait. Like go ahead and start having an idea of what you're going to deal with now, and go ahead and have an idea of how you're going to handle that now. And like he did that in recruiting. That was probably the best thing he did, which is why he's so successful where he is now. But he was an unbelievable recruiter. And a lot of that reason is because he was always 2 steps ahead of the curve. He always knew like, hey, these are the ones I'm going to go after. This is where they're at. This is what I mean. He used to have, to talk about how old school this was. He had index cards that he had printed out, and they were like templates. And it was like a Valdosta State recruiting index card. And he would write down name, height, weight, date of birth, address, school, GPA, statistics. I mean, like he had an index card on every single kid, and he kept them in order. He kept them organized. He kept them in order. And like we'd go to a staff meeting, they'd say, what's going on with Johnny Smith? And man, he'd pull out that index card. And he'd be like, I'll tell you exactly what's going on with him. And I remember like, it sounds very dated and old school, but like that right there was a way of like, of doing things that just really was like, I was like, man, that's the way it's got to be. Like at the time I was like, man, that's the way it's got to be. You've got to be that detailed. You've got to be that organized to have a chance to be successful. Because it's all those things that is what, to me, makes a football coach the best.
Yeah.
Everybody knows 4 verticals. Everybody knows cover 4. But how organized are you in the way that it's delivered? How organized are you the way that it actually is presented to the players, so on and so forth? And that, to me, is what makes is the separation between good and great in coaching. So
definitely. So my next question is what was it like transitioning then from college ball to high school ball?
It actually was pretty eye-opening, like, besides the talent part. I mean, ball is ball. I tell people that all the time. Like, I mean, what's the Rex Ryan quote about, football is a really easy game made very difficult by football coaches.
Right.
And, ball is ball. I mean, like the stuff that we do at Brookwood, like you can see it on TV, like you see, and I laugh because I'm like, man, I've done that with so much less talent. And like, I mean, inside zone is inside zone, so on and so forth. And so I think that was not the hard part. The hard part was knowing that what kind of animal I was dealing with. You're dealing with a college athlete, like even back then in 2010, like some of those kids, like they're not going to college without that sport. They're not getting an education without that sport. And a lot of them were like, they were going to be the first to graduate from college. They were going to be they were the first to actually get into college. And so you were dealing with a different animal in terms of like what you could expect to get out of them in terms of their work ethic, in terms of their commitment and things of that nature. When you got to high school, my first thing that jumped and hit me in the face was that, all right, I'm not dealing with as quite a motivated individual as I was in college football, and then you throw in the teaching aspect of it, because that was the thing that was great about college football, and it was crazy and mind numbing. But I mean, for
it's 2.5 years, all day, man.
2.5 years, I mean, it was 6 a.m. to midnight every day. I mean, it didn't matter in season. I mean, it was 6 a.m. to midnight, and you go home, get a little shut eye, you pop back up,
right back out and do it over again.
I mean, that was, and the thing is crazy is like, back then there was no Celsius, there was no Monster Energy drink, there was no like Red Bull. I think it barely come on the scene. 5-hour Energy, like there was none of that.
Yeah.
Like it was black coffee. That was all you had. And I remember we drank that stuff like it was water. You know what I mean? Like it was. I mean, that was what kept you going. But it was. I think that was probably the thing that was really eye opening to me as a just kind of standing back and scanning was like, I know that I'm tired, but I don't feel it. You know, like, yeah, like I know that I should be exhausted, but I don't really feel it. You know, and it was one of those that was kind of one of the things that jumped out to me. So, but then you get to high school and it's like, all right, these kids have been in school all day long. You know, they're tired, they're bored. You know, they you know, I remember I wanted to have like a team meeting one time, and like I pulled all these kids in, and like I'm sitting there going through this stuff, wearing out. I look back, man, half of them are knocking out. I was like, I mean, initially I was like about to lose it. I was like, what are we, you know, this is ridiculous, you know. But then I kind of had to think about it for a second. I was like, well, hang on now. Like, I mean, I cannot expect that what I was getting out of scholarship players that I'm getting out of high school players. And like, so you got to check yourself at the door when you're making a transition like that from whether it's college to high school or even from one high school to the next. I mean, coaching at a single A school and then going to a 6A school, like you're dealing with a different animal, like you're dealing with different players. You know, you think about what we've got. If somebody like I think about like a new coach on our staff who's coming from a smaller school to this school, like what's he thinking right now, experiencing all this and seeing, you know, all the different dynamics that we've got and things of that nature. And you know, how they're kind of processing it, because I think everything's different, you know, the different levels require different things. But the biggest adjustment to me was like, it wasn't so much the ball. It wasn't so much the time. Like my timeline is my timeline. Like it doesn't matter if I was coaching my son's AU football team. Like my timeline's my timeline. Like there's nothing that's ever going to adjust that, unfortunately. But it's just is the product that you're working with, you know, and a little bit of that is talent, but the majority of it is the mindset. Like what kind of mindset are you really dealing with? Because, you know, not everywhere do they have players that are dying to get recruited. Not everywhere are players in high school football teams that are looking for this to be their opportunity. They're doing it because their buddies are doing it. They're doing it because
dad wants to do it.
Yeah, the dad wants to do it, or the girl they like said that she really likes football players. You know what I mean? Like it's whatever there's different circumstances for everybody. And so you have to understand that as a coach. Otherwise you'll go crazy. Go crazy. Insane. You know, trying to figure out like why isn't everybody on my level? Well, they're not supposed to be. You know, they're not supposed to be. They're kids. You've got to meet them. And by no means do I mean lower your standards. You got your standards, but you've got to understand. You've got to take your standards and find a way to meet them in the middle to get them to get on with you. So that was probably the biggest adjustment right there.
Gotcha. And you mentioned the talent. Was it hard? Like going from college with the really good talent, and then you get to high school, and you know, like I know there's some kids that you're saying, you know, I need you to down block to the left, and they take 3 steps to the right before they ever go to the left. So
there was definitely some what the hell moments, man. It really was. I mean, it was like some things where I was like, "Oh, buddy, like, what did I get myself into?" But you know, like the biggest thing. There's 2 things that really stood out: the line of scrimmage and quarterback arm strength. Like those are things that you cannot, like, there's shifty kids everywhere. There's kids that can backpedal everywhere. You know, tackling to me, like, yes, it's something that needs to be taught, but like to me, and this is probably not going to be very popular, like I can tell you within 5 seconds whether a kid can tackle or not. Like it's one of those. It's one of those things where like either they got it or they don't.
Yep. Because you got to want to tackle.
You got to want to.
Yeah.
Exactly. But the line of scrimmage and probably me being an offensive guy was quarterback arm strength was like, all right, there's, you know, you've got to be honest with yourself. Like there's certain things that I'm used to seeing thrown that don't exist. You know what I'm saying? Like, but I also think that being a good coach is sitting there saying like, all right, well, we broke that route at 18 at college. We probably can still do it, but we need to break it at 10, you know, or 8. You know, and finding ways to adapt to your personnel, which is, it's a whole different conversation. But like, I think that to me was probably the biggest thing was, the quarterback arm strength was like, I'm used to a guy that can, take a snap, one step drop and send a, 35-yard rope to the opposite numbers.
Yeah.
Where, you get in high school, like you may not have a kid that can throw it 20 yards from hash to hash. And it's like, all right, well, we got to do something, we've got to find a way to adapt that and make that happen. So, but those two areas and the offensive line, defensive line, like, that's a whole different animal. Like you sit there and watch, guys in college that like take their pass sets with passion. You take defensive linemen who work on their club rip with like it's everything to them. And then you get to high school and then you got guys that just, they pop up out of their stance and it's like, just get in the way, and so, I just got done my last year at VSU. There was a guy there by the name of Ryan Schrader. He ended up getting drafted by the Falcons, played for a long time for him. And I'm used to sitting there watching him pre-practice, just like taking, kick slides and working on punch. And, if he missed a block, man, like he was one of those guys, he was definitely not all there. But like he would miss a block and like he would like hit himself in the helmet and get mad at himself. And then you go to high school and like a kid misses a block and he looks at you like, what did I do? That was wrong. And it's like, oh yeah, so that right there was probably the, in terms of offensive line, defensive line, you got defensive linemen that are, they don't know where to line up. They're just, they're just bull rushing everything and wondering how come they're not getting any sacks and this, that, and the other. And so, there was, those two areas were the biggest jump outs to me is like, all right, well, this is different and I'm going to have to make some adjustments here. And, I'd say probably and this is more of a mental talent as well as like when you're dealing with college guys that you can have intellectual football conversation with them.
Yes.
They haven't gotten to that point by not knowing anything. I don't care what people say about players from the past that don't know the playbook or don't baloney. Those guys know football. Yeah. Those guys. I just got done watching a thing with Rob Gronkowski, and everybody always thinks he's this big old galoot that's not intelligent. Man, that guy's a genius. Like
he plays the role very well.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. He does. He does, and like he knows football and he understands leverage and understands coverage and understands all that stuff. And like that's just one of those things. Like you can't. In some places, it's hard to have those conversations, hard to explain. That was probably a big challenge, like being able to explain something to a college player and then being able to explain something to a high school player. Yeah. Like your vernacular had to change.
Definitely.
And so that was another big change right there.
So what about going into the classroom, the teaching part? How was that transition?
It really wasn't that bad. I mean, like I've never been one that's like been a shy person. So, I mean, like it didn't bother me. And like I think one of the things that helped me too was like I was probably a little full of myself. Like I walked in, I was like, hey, I'm an ex-college coach. Like, these little kids ain't gonna scare me none, kind of thing. And so like it really kind of came natural. And kind of one of my things is like I just like helping. I just like helping people. Like at the end of the day, like that's kind of always. Anytime I meet a new group of people that I'm leading, like that's one of the first things I tell them. Like my number one goal in all of this, whether it's teaching health, teaching football, it wouldn't matter if it was driver's ed. I mean, like my number one objective here is simply put, is to help you. And I think that mindset is always kind of giving me a leg up in situations where like I'm going into a new venue, like from where I didn't have to teach anything and I was working on football all day long to now, like I've got lesson plans to do. I've got grade books to do. Like I've got to make sure that I'm not going to get, I'm not just one of those guys that just rolls the ball out there and says, hey, y'all occupy yourselves for 30 minutes while I work on game planning, cause I knew, like there was some credibility that had to go along with that, like you could just be some fresh kid in a new job and take on that role of just being able to just kind of be a bystander. Like you had to go out there and prove your worth and be a good teacher. And I think that was a good lesson that somebody taught me. It was like, hey, don't forget, like when you go and do the high school thing and you go do schooling, like just break down the percentage of what that paycheck really is saying. like, the majority of a large portion of your pay every month is coming from the teaching, and
Yes.
very, very small amount of it is coming from the football. And
Very
so
small.
don't forget that. And that was a good lesson that someone told me, and it always kind of stuck with me. And it's like, I could, I've always been one of those ones where it's like I'm, as much as it pains me, like I'm gonna make sure I take care of that first,
Mhm.
and make sure that that's right. And like honestly, like that makes me more nervous than not being prepared for something in football. Is
Yes.
if I feel like that I'm slacking in the classroom, that bothers me. It really
That
does. Like
that
it
yeah.
makes me feel like oh man, like I'm in trouble. Like I did
That
something wrong.
that gets you fired a lot quicker, so
Yeah, no
definitely.
doubt, no doubt, no
Mhm.
doubt. Like
Oh, yeah.
they were like, and there's some people too, like and I'm sure your audience can understand, like there's some administrators in high school, they don't care about football.
No.
They don't care. They
Mhm.
don't care if y'all win one game. But if they walk by your classroom and you got half the room sleeping and the other half of the room throwing pencils and this, that, and the other, like
Yeah, we got a problem.
you could win every game that y'all play. It don't matter to them. They're like, hey,
Mhm.
this is an academically structured classroom. Like, get out of here.
Yep.
Next.
So
Um,
true.
so yeah, but the transition was not that bad. It really wasn't. Like I enjoyed teaching. I feel like it keeps you young. You get to hear all the new
The
what's
new
in, what's
everything.
not in. Yeah,
Yeah.
you get to hear all kind of stuff. And, it's hilarious. It's like it's almost like they feel like we don't have ears and we can't understand anything, type stuff. And but like I enjoyed it. I really did. And be honest to goodness with you, like here's the final statement about it. I felt like teaching helped me because it was a break.
Yeah.
It got my mind off of it for a little bit. Like if I could, it was the break that I probably needed that I couldn't get when I was in college coaching, because every minute was crucial. Like where's this breakdown? Have you
Mhm.
started working on the next one? Where's that kid going on? Is that kid coming on Saturday for the unofficial? I mean, like that every day, every minute of every day, there's something.
Yeah.
Where in high school, it's like, yeah, you could fill your time up like that, but you're going to end up doing more harm than good. So, like, that teaching break was good for me. Like, it helped kind of keep me balanced.
Mhm.
So,
Definitely. And you've talked about this already a little bit, which is basically, that schedule, the college schedule as far as football goes. It's an all day, every day thing. Meanwhile, you dive into the high school realm of things, and it's, you get 2 hours of practice plus an hour of, meetings, and then we're not, weight room guys, so we're not getting that time in the weight room with them. How was that, when you got to high school? So now you don't get as much time with that group
yeah,
anymore.
that probably was the toughest thing of it all right there. Was like, I was like, well, I remember the first place I went, I was like, well, when do I get to meet him with them? Like, what time do y'all normally do meetings and this, that, and they're like, meetings.
Meetings.
We talk about like, yeah, they go to weight training, they come in, they get ready for practice, we go to practice. I'm like, well, like, I mean, it was an oddity to me. And then also too, like, you mean to tell me we got to share players? Like those kids play defense too.
Oh yeah.
Like, I mean, I had five deep at one position. Like we had 18 scholarship offensive linemen. Like, I mean, you mean to tell me like I got to share these kids with the defense too? Like that. I mean, I was like, well, how are they going to know what to do? Like when are we ever going to practice? And that was probably a biggest adjustment right there. Was like, hey, you know, that call sheet's going to have to get trimmed way down.
Yeah.
The planning, and it really I needed that, because when I went into it, I still had that mindset of like, hey, you've got to watch film for an ungodly amount of time. You've got to
Hmm.
break down everything from shoelace color to what number did that guy wear last week, the whole 9 yards. I mean, you've got to break down everything too. And then also like what are they doing? And then you get to this and it's like, well, that's a waste of my time,
Yeah.
like to go through all of that, because the time I do have, um, I'm not gonna be able to get all of that taught, all
Mm-mm.
that implemented and things of that nature. So it was one of those things. It was that was probably the biggest adjustment right there, because I was used to 6 a.m. I'm in there by 8 o'clock. We're having a staff meeting, and I better have, the practice schedule already printed. I need to talk to the filmers, make sure they're good to go. And then my position group would come in. They had early morning lift, so that would be my time to meet with them.
Yeah.
And then by lunch, like I was part of the crew that was already moving on to the next opponent. Like we were already starting to break down their games for the next whenever we got done with things, and all that. And then, oh, by the way, like the practice time's getting close, and we got to have pre-practice meetings. And then after practice, we were watching practice as a staff. And then it's like, all right, hey, go start getting ready for third down plan. Go start getting ready for red zone plan. I want to meet at 11 o'clock tonight on red zone plan. And just bam, 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 everything every day. And so then you go to high school and it's like, all right, well, practice is from 3 to 5. And then, oh, by the way, if that kid's here longer than 5:30, like we're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Like their parents are coming to get them at 5:15. And I remember probably the worst chewing in all my life I've ever gotten was the fact that I was sitting there. I had held a kid after practice to work on something. I in my heart, I thought I was doing the right thing by like trying to get him right. Man, that lady chewed me out from 6 ways from Sunday. She was trying to get somewhere and she couldn't find her son. And it was because I was holding him after practice, doing what I thought was right by coaching him up and getting him better.
Mm-hmm.
And that lady said, Coach, 5:30 means 5:30, and we have got to go. This is ridiculous. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. So that was a big adjustment of trying to just kind of navigate through all of that.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say right now we're in a spot where we're very fortunate and lucky because we got a ton of parents that love. So if you need a kid to be there early, they're gonna make sure they're early, and if they need to stay late, same situation. Yeah. So definitely a blessing in that sense. So how did your college schedule or that scheduling, that organization, that plan, like what did you bring from that to high school? Like what was helpful in that you were able to bring with you?
It was, it's the popular word of process, but like it was that's what it was. It was like it taught me how that right there gave me the framework of like how to go about a week. Like what does it look like the moment that the clock strikes 0 on this game until the very next game? Like what does that process look like? And we were fortunate to where it was like the college schedule that my experience was like you'd get done on Saturday and we'd meet on Sunday, and like Sunday was completely dedicated to the previous game. Like pretty much the entire day was like, hey, I wouldn't say the entire day, but majority of it was like when the head coach got there at noon, like it was, all right, let's talk about it. Let's watch it. Let's talk about it. And then you meet with your players, like make the corrections. Let's go on. And then, that was like 5, 6 o'clock at night. Well, then it's like every coach went into their office and boom, it was off to the next one, and then it was, you're there all night. And then first thing Monday morning, it's like, all right, let's start. Let's start on the next one. Yeah. And so kind of like having that framework of like, what does it look like the moment the game ends to you're starting to get ready for the next one. And then once you start getting ready for the next one is having that structure and having that discipline to say like, all right, it's not all going to be done in one day. You've got to understand like this thing's a puzzle that you got to continue to put together throughout the week and make it to where, you're presenting something to the players that A, they know, and B, that they can actually go out there and operate. And so that the schedule that I took with me from college, like I kind of was able to get my own groove of like how I do things. I'm going to be one that I need to watch something a lot. Like I need to watch it a lot. And one of the things that still kind of irks me to this day is that like I'll see something on Wednesday that I wish I would have caught on Sunday, and it's like there's just not enough time. I wish I would have seen it on Sunday, but you've got a family that you still got to attend to as well, and they deserve my time, and I want to be there for that. And so like you make your choices, but a lot of times there's things that pop up where it's like, man, I'd have seen that if I'd have had unlimited time. I'd have seen that if I'd have had 2 days to really watch tape
Yep.
And things of that nature. And you know, have an understanding of like, there's a reason that you do certain things away in college because you've got that kind of time,
Yeah.
and you've got to adjust it when you get to high school because you don't have that kind of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I was always one where like I was still hanging on. I was still hanging on for dear life. I was like, man, like that's the way it works. I know that's the way it works. I've got to find a way to make that to where it's an adaptable schedule to my circumstances now.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that schedule I brought with me, that mindset that I brought with me was like, hey, I'm going to watch it. I'm going to get an understanding, like going through all the details of breaking something down from an offensive perspective. And then now, all right, you know, don't outcoach yourself. Like go see what you see is what you get.
Yep.
Don't go ghost hunting. You know, make it what it is, and then run with it, and then start your plan. Because you mean the longer that is one of the issues too, is that the longer you watch something,
Oh yeah, the more ideas you start coming up with.
more
Yeah.
ideas you come up with, and not to discredit anybody, but in college football, like the reason that they can do what they do is because their players are so good. So like what you see is what you get a lot of times. In high school football, and you and I've had this conversation before, man, that you turn on the tape, sometimes you're like, what in the world is that? Like what are they playing? Like that's something I've never seen before. Like what, and then all of a sudden you start second guessing yourself, like, well, oh my God, like what is that? Like
Yep.
like what coverage is that? And it's like, man, they don't know.
No,
And so it's like you kind of get in your own way sometimes where, you know, you play, you know, you get ready for North Alabama and it's like, man, like they're 4 3/4. Like there's nothing really to focus here. It's just, you know, their 4 and their 3 are really, really good, you know? So, you know, it's, you know, it was one of those things where, you know, of just not getting in your own way. And when you got into high school coaching, as opposed to college coaching, is, you know, see it, process it, go from there, and then make it
Definitely.
happen. So,
Yep. So like when we as coaches, you know, we say all the cliche stuff about, you know, you got to be on time. You got to be organized. If you're doing it wrong today, I know you're not going to do it right on Friday.
yeah.
Like why are those things important?
I mean, I think probably the biggest thing is that nobody says this, but you're trying to create creatures of habit. And I think that you know, I heard something the other day, and I'll butcher it if I try to, but it was like it was the quote about who I am habit. And it was like, you know, if you don't give me the time, if you don't give me the effort, like I'm gonna crush you. But if you give me the time and give me the effort, like I'm gonna put the world at your feet. And the end of it was, who am I? And it says, I am habit.
Yeah.
And I remember I've heard that before, and it was also something where like it really that to me is everything. Is that, you know, yeah, you're teaching them the life lesson of, you know, time. I've been saying this forever, is that time is a non-refundable commodity.
Oh yeah.
You know, you'll never get it back, so don't waste it. Being on time shows respect, and like all those things you said we talk about all the time. But really at the base of it, you're trying to create creatures of habit, because creatures of habit are the ones, to me, that are always going to rise to the top of the food chain. Like they're always going to be the ones that survive when everybody else quits. The ones who have the creature of habit, the ones who are the creatures of habit, the ones who can fall back on what they know is going to happen. Those are the ones that are going to be able to, those are your foxhole guys. Those are the ones you can count on.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter if you're talking about football. It doesn't matter if you're talking about business. It doesn't matter if you're talking about life. It's relevant to everything. So I think it's important, especially as the position we're at of molding young people and kind of guiding them in a direction to make them successful, is having them understand, like, I'm a big believer in the why. Like I used to, for a long time, I was a guy who was like, hey, do this because I said do it. And then quickly I realized, like, man, that's so disrespectful.
Yeah.
You know, that's so disrespectful, and that's so arrogant and ignorant at the same time. Like if I was in their shoes, like thinking back to it, like I want to know the why. Like, why is it important that I'm here on time? Why is it important that being there at 8:00 when we're supposed to be there at 8:00, that's late? Like I think that the why is one of my challenges in life, is that I'm more focused on explaining the why than I am like just dictating, like, boom, I said to do this, here, do that.
Yep.
Because also kind of going back to what we said at the very beginning, we're dealing with different cats nowadays. Like, I mean, it's a different, when you were in high school and I was in high school, it was, hey, jump high. And it was, man, you were screaming to get to the top, where now it's, you say jump high and they say, why?
For what?
What do you need to jump high for? And you got to, and to me, however people want to take this, respectful or disrespectful, if you're worth your salt, you better know the why.
Yeah.
You better know the why as a coach. And if you don't, then you're not doing yourself any favors. You're not really doing these kids any favors at all. So I think that one of the things that I always kind of fall back on is that, I'm going to make sure that I create good creatures of habit in terms of, them learning something from this situation, them learning the why. Why is it important? Not everybody's the same. I grew up in a house where my dad was a very, like, people comment sometimes on my work ethic. I was a minuscule compared to him. I mean, like, he was 4 a.m. no matter what day it was. He was, my little to-do list that I make, there's a place I got that from. Like, it was him, and it was every morning he had a note card and he made his list for the day. And it was like, I mean, he was just a monster in work ethic. And I got real quick, like, I had that to look at. Not everybody has that. Not every kid has that. There's kids, even at a school like Brookwood, was very prominent and very respected. We've got kids that don't have that figure to look at and really see. So, like, they won't ever say it, but they're thirsty for it. They're thirsty for the why. And, like, why is it that you do it like that? Why are you working like that? Yep. People always ask me, Coach Fendley, why you walk so fast? I'm like, man, I got things to do. I got work to do, man. Like, time is money. Like, we got to go.
Yeah.
And, all I can do is that. All I can do is show by example. I don't want to ever be just flapping my gums just to, make myself be heard. Like, I'd rather them see it. I'd rather them see it and hear it and know the why and things of that nature for them to say, like, all right, well, that seems to work. Like, maybe I should try that, Yeah.
Now, I'll tell you a funny story. I was training a kid, and this kid is now playing cornerback at East Tennessee. Funny place. But he's playing cornerback at East Tennessee, and my uncle brought him to me so that I could work with him and train him. And so before we did every drill, like, there were a couple of, like, the kids I'm coaching that are out there going through the drill as well. And I'm explaining everything as to why we're doing it, what we're hoping or what we possibly could see that would make this drill effective. And we spent about an hour together. And when they left, my uncle takes this kid home and he calls me and he said, yo, for some reason, that kid talked about you the entire drive home. And I was like, really? He was like, yeah. He's like, I'm gonna just say you did a good job. Not sure, what exactly went from that, but I'll just say you did a good job. A couple of days later, he calls me back. He was like, hey, man, this kid really wants to come back and train with you. He said nobody has ever explained to him why you're doing certain drills. Yeah. And because of that, like, he just thinks so highly of you. He was like, I understand why the kids that play for him have been so good. They understand what they're doing it for. They're not just being told to do X, Y, Z, and now you're just supposed to go do it. And I was like, and I was sitting there thinking, I was like, nobody's ever explained that to him before. Like, I thought that was how everybody coached.
Exactly. Like, and sometimes, there's a fine line too, because, like, a lot of times there are coaches where, like, a post route turns into a dissertation. And it's like, man, like, there's that fine line of, like, overdoing it and overstating it. But then there's also, on the flip side of that, is like, hey, run this post at 10 and break it to the upright no matter what. Well, that's bad coaching. There's got to be adjustments. Like, it's no different than, it's like, hey, you've and this being defensive, like, you've got the middle third. Well, all right, great. You know,
what does that include?
what does that include? Like, what do I do if they got two in the middle third? You know, who do I cover? You know, and it's like, but like to me, it's like there's both ends of the spectrum. You've got like, hey, do this. And then you've got like, hey, with your right foot and your weight at 80%, you got a head snap here and break back to that. And it's like, man, you lost that kid. Like, have instruction, and then have a why.
Yep.
And then be able to stay, and this is probably the biggest thing, stay consistent with it. Stay consistent with it. Like, if time should be a big thing, if time is a big aspect to you, be consistent with it. If coming to a meeting with a notebook is important to you, be consistent with it, and explain to them why they need to come to the meeting with a notebook. And so I think all of those things are the why and the relevancy of why we do what we do.
Definitely. So let's talk practice for just a quick second. So when everybody's going to practice with some sort of a plan, we hope. But what's the best use of that practice time, and what do you think most teams are neglecting when they're going to practice?
Best use of practice time to me is, and this is probably kind of the answer for both questions. The best use of practice time to me is the thing that teams are neglecting is working on themselves.
Yeah.
I think that far too often, and I'm not being a hypocrite. I'm not going to be a hypocrite here and act like I've never done this, because everybody's got to learn their lesson the hard way. But I've been that guy where it's like, hey, we roll out there on Monday and here's a whole new gamut. Here's a whole new scheme. Here's all this new. And, never mind that we lost by 15 the Friday before. and a lot of times, like, you can get caught in that trap of like, I've got to find a way to make things exciting and spicy to the kids and get them to buy in. And sometimes it works. And then, but it's also a slippery slope. So I think the best use of time in practice is, you got to make adjustments. Like there's something where they're doing something, you've got to prepare for it. You've got to protect yourself against it. And then there's also something that they're vulnerable at, and you've got to find a way to attack that.
Exploit, yeah.
But those are very minimal in terms of like what should be taking place, and that's like what is it that we need to get better at? It's like the age old, the Belichick story where he talks about, like, he gets on the plane and all these guys are doing all this analytics, and he's like, guys, we lost the game because we can't tackle. He's like, we didn't lose the game because of our decisions on third down and whether or not we ran or passed the ball or what coverages we ran on second down. He's like, we lost the game because we can't tackle. And like a lot of times, like stuff like that, I think fundamentals, I think the best use of practice time is like, you've got to be fundamentally sound in all aspects of things. Like we talk about it in that youth thing. I always bring it up every year, like stance. Stance is a skill. And I heard something you said on this podcast not too long ago was that about hands, about teaching them to play with their hands.
Yeah.
Like that's like sounds something so simple, but it's something that stands the test of time. Blocking and tackling and playing with your hands has stood the test of time in this game. And I think a lot of times people get so caught up in scheme and so caught up in flavor of the month, or, I love college football and NFL football just as much as the next guy, but sometimes it's the worst thing that can happen.
Yeah.
I'll see something, I'm like, man, that was beautiful.
We got to plug that in.
And like, there's nothing wrong with that. I think the best coaches out there are the ones that can watch that great play happen and see it, and then find a way to digest it and say, all right, how can I make that work within what we're already doing? Even if it's just a change of a route and something you've been doing forever, like that little adjustment right there, that's a good coach, as opposed to sitting there watching Ohio State do something. Well, yeah, they did that because, this day and age, they got cats on that team that are there for a reason, and they can do that. You're not going to be able to run switch verts delay now 3 with a couple kids that are in U.S. history for the 7th period of the day, and then they come to practice. Like, they're not going to be able to remember that or do that. So it's I think that's the best use of practice time is fundamentals and working on yourself. And I also think teams are neglecting those two things as well the most probably right now.
Definitely. I can agree with you on that. So you've been doing this for a while. I'm not going to throw out a number.
See, I'm calloused.
But what are the biggest changes that you've noticed in high school ball over the years?
You know, I said it going back to that coach's clinic we had the other day. I mean, and I mean this with all due respect. I think football's gotten sloppy. I think it has. I think that the way you see guys tackle nowadays, the way you see guys, the way that they run their routes, the way that they block, the pride that they take in blocking, the throws that people are making, all that stuff. I think it's gotten kind of sloppy because kind of going back to your last question is that practice time is not being utilized appropriately. People don't like to practice. And that starts from the coach. I think coaches are not doing a very good job of putting the extreme premium on practice and explaining just exactly. I mean, we've all used the cliche statement of you only play a small percentage of the time in this game. You're like football is one of the only sports where you practice I don't know, the crazy percentage more than you actually play.
Yeah.
And so, why would practice not be the highest premium? And I think a lot of times whenever practice is not a premium in your program, that's when football starts to become a little sloppy. And then you start seeing things that are just, like we always like to joke, like that's bad ball, that's not sound. That's bad football. And I think the easy go-to is all the things you're seeing in media. I'm never going to really get to that and put a blame game on that. Cause I mean, it's society. It's where we're at right now. I think the best you can do is try to manage that, but I'm not going to be naive and say that I hadn't played a role in some of the sloppiness in football where, you're getting to a point now where it's like, we had a meeting about this recently but everybody deals with this is 10 years ago, you didn't have to worry about kids missing summer practice due to going to camps. And if there was, it was a once a blue moon type of thing, not 10 practices over the summer that they're going to miss because they're going to,
every college across the country,
5 college camps over the summer. And it's so I think that to me is probably one of the bigger changes, all the 7-on-7s, all the things like that are happening. And I think that's good because at the end of the day, yeah, it's frustrating sometimes, but at the same time, I think you also got to look at it through the lens of man, it's still keeping the game going. It's still keeping football relevant. It's still making it to where kids can do this and find a way to make themselves noticeable via the game of football at all times. So I'm usually that old crusty guy in the corner sitting there saying, man, this is ridiculous. Why are they doing that? This is a waste of our time. That's not real football. But then I hope the smarter side of me says well, yeah, but it's still keeping the game going. It's still keeping the game relevant. And I think that as much unsolicited opinions that we get nowadays, I think that one of the things that is always kind of a concern is man, that if anything can go, so can football. And I would hate to see that happen at any kind of time and place in this country, because I think we've already hit on it so many times. Its value is not, you can't put a monetary price on it. And so I think that the lack of attention to detail from scheduling practices and the premium that people are making on practices to the lack of continuity that's being created amongst teams because football has kind of turned more individualized than it ever has before, where kids didn't get recruited till they were sophomores and juniors in high school. Whenever I was in high school, now you got kids that are coming out of 7th grade who, they've already talked to this, that, and the other, and they're getting offers and it's all about how can I get that? I hear our kids say hey, did you get the O? Did you get the O? And it's man, I don't even know what that meant. I don't even know what that means. But then it dawned on me really quickly. I was all right, yeah, I know what that means. And I learned quick, that's the driving point. I think the driving point has changed over the years, where it used to be like, hey, how can we be a really good football team? And to where it's now like, how can I get my name out there and get me noticed? And then, oh yeah, then on Friday night, I'm gonna go play with those guys too. Like, I think that's becoming a more of a norm than it used to be.
Yep, I agree. You've been a guy that's worn a number of hats: offensive coordinator, special teams coordinator, head coach, GA, position coach, all that stuff. What is something that you've learned being in each role that's essentially helped you today?
Well, I'll kind of work from the top backwards. Being a head coach made me probably the assistant coach that I feel like I am now, because because my mindset is I'm always going to be what I wanted when I was in that spot before.
Yep.
When I was a head coach, what did I want out of an assistant coach? Well, I wanted a guy that I never really had to tell him what to do. I wanted a guy that if I had something constructive to say to him, that it wasn't going to be a personal attack viewpoint by himself. Like, I wanted a guy that dropped his ego at the door. I wanted a guy that I knew was going to take care of his business. And so as an assistant coach, like, that's always been my driving point. I'm never going to make it to where my position is the problem child. I'm never going to make it to where like the coach has got to always make sure that is my position doing what they're supposed to be doing. Yeah. Or my guys communicated with, the whole, like, everything that I wanted as a head coach out of my assistants. That's what I try to be now for the head coach that I work for now. And as far as the other roles, like being offensive coordinator, what I've learned from that is that, it's not so much about what I know, is more about what they know. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of times, and this just kind of comes with the territory, even though as much as I try to fight it, an offensive coordinator can be an egotistical role a lot of times. and it's something where, I learned this going every day. Everything kind of goes back to Coach Wallace. One of the things that he used to do that I always thought was interesting, it didn't matter who we played, they were always the best team in the country to him. Like he would have you believing that we were about to go play an 0-8 West Alabama team, and in his eyes, in his mind, they were the best thing ever. And in his eyes, in his mind, that we were not ready defensively. And I have to tell kids that's how my mind works. Like, y'all are never going to hear me say, great job. Y'all are never going to hear me say, like, that was really good, because it could always be better. And I'm always going to keep y'all grounded on a level of understanding, like, hey, more so to keep myself grounded too. Like, we'll have an okay practice. Like, I'm that guy that, like, it's never good. Like, my wife even had a conversation with me at the beginning of this spring. After practice one, she was like, how'd it go? And I gave my traditional answer. She said, you know what? I'm not going to ask anymore. I'm not asking anymore. She's like, either have a better attitude or I'm not asking anymore. And so it was like, okay, I'll do better about it, because in my mind, it's always like, it's always not good. And I'm always like, man, like that's just not good football, and that's bad. And like, I'm doing a terrible job. Like, I've got to get better. But I don't ever want to get out of that though. You know what I'm saying? Like, I never want to. I feel like the day that I walk off a practice field, I'm like, man, we got this thing down. Like, that's a bad day for me. Like, I feel like that's when it's like, hey boys, it's time to go. It's time to go sell golf clubs for a living, or do something, because that's a bad deal. But one of the things that you asked me about right there was the position I had last year. And I feel like I'm trying not to get on too much of a tangent here, but like, being a special teams coordinator, man, like, that to me is something that people do not take enough pride in. They really don't, because I think that is something where, and that goes back to being a GA. One of the things that I did as a GA was all the GAs, we were on every special team. I had a portion to coach in every single special team: punt, rush, kickoff, extra point, the whole 9 yards. So I learned more about special teams in the beginning than I did offense and defense. As a matter of fact, I know I did. And I saw quickly how important it was for your special teams to be just as organized, if not more organized, than your offense and your defense, because you get 70 snaps. We're an up-tempo team, so you're getting 70 snaps of offensive football. It's okay if there's one that's not good. Yeah. one bad special teams play, that could turn a game in a hurry. So, it's like that thing. It was like, man, you get 4 shots maybe to do it right. And if one of them's wrong, that's bad. That's real bad. And so like the attention to detail and, what I'm going to be referring to here is like, you spend all this time getting ready for a situation and then it never happens. And you're like, oh, I just wasted all my time. This, that, the other. Shout out Jimenez, my guy over at the Lions, who came out and kicked one time. But, but I think being a special teams coordinator is one of probably the best roles that a guy can have when they're working their way up in the profession, because you've got to understand everything. To me, a special teams coordinator needs to know how people need to tackle. I've talked about this before, like especially like kickoff and punt. Like if you don't understand run fits, I don't know if you can coach kickoff and punt team. No. And even as an offensive coach, like that was one of the things. Like I understand run fits from a basic standpoint as a defensive person. So, like, I use that mindset in coaching kickoff and punt team. How are we going to fit the returner? How are we going to fit this thing up? Just like if you don't understand, blocking terminology, it's going to be hard for you to coach kickoff return. Yeah. In terms of like, understanding how things are going to mesh up and how to drop to certain angles and things like that. So, I think being a special teams coordinator is one of the things that if I would give advice to a younger guy who's working their way up is like, man, get in as much of that as you can, because being a special teams coach to me makes you a better football coach, because you have to get outside your comfort zone, do something that's not as important, do something that's not as like attractive as being the OC or DC. Yep. But it's more relevant than people will ever know. Of being a special teams coordinator, being a part of the special teams coach, because one guy fits it the wrong way on defense, like you may have a chance to get it right. The guy runs his route at 8 yards instead of 10 yards. There's a chance you're still going to complete it. Somebody blocks the wrong guy on punt rush, and now that blown up, it's a bad day. It's a real bad day. So your margin for error is so small on special teams. And one of the things I learned too, being a special teams coordinator, was like just how important it has to be from a program standpoint. Like if Mike Vrabel said something the other day, it was like the true test of culture in your team is like what happens after a loss. I agree with that. I also think the true test of character in your team is how many guys are willing to play special teams. How many guys are willing to play special teams, and how many of them are not only willing to play special teams, but take pride and importance in what they're doing on special teams. You find a team that like you got a couple guys that are hungry for special teams. And like that was the case in point last year. Like I felt like there was times where like we gave up a big kickoff return in the game, and I come in at the halftime and I got 3 kids sitting there waiting on me. They were like, "What happened? What did we do wrong? Like what's going on?" And like part of me was like, I better have an answer, but B, in my mind I was like, yes, like they take pride in this. It was something that they valued and they took pride in it, and so I think that's always a good indicator. And so that's something I learned from being a special teams coordinator, was just how much that plays a role in everything and just how important that job is. But it's kind of something I learned from each one of those that kind of helped me be where I'm at right now in terms of my mindset going into everything.
Yeah. And for me growing up, big thing, like I would watch Virginia Tech, Coach Beamer.
Oh yeah.
And all they talked about during the courses of those games were special teams. Yeah. So at one point in time, like I remember my junior year in high school, like I'm not a starter on offense or defense, but I am on every special team that I could be on, because we took that serious. And I'm watching Virginia Tech and seeing that, they take this really serious. So I got to take this really serious. And I remember blocking punts and seeing them go out and block punts. And you're like, I want to be on the special. I didn't want to be on defense. I didn't want to be on offense. I wanted to go block a punt. Like I thought that was the biggest, greatest thing. So
it really is. And to me, it's an opportunity for like if kids really would kind of give it a chance. Like I think about the kid that was a 4th team running back for us last year. A great special teams player, man, and he took pride in it. And I think one of the things you've got to do a good job of, and this is something this is something you learn as a special teams coach, is like making sure that kids can get pride in that. Like, man, I would celebrate Mike like crazy.
Yeah.
I'd tell people, anybody who will listen, like, man, hey, that's one of the baddest dudes on this team. He may be 4'8", he may not be very big, but by God, he runs his tail down there and he will cover and he will tackle. And he made a tackle in that game against one of our region opponents, and jumped up and was pounding his chest, and everybody was patting him on the helmet and loving him. And like, that's what it's all about. Like, that's it right there. That's it. And that kid, I guarantee you, he didn't probably play anything other than special teams that night. But I promise you, he felt really good after that game was over with. He finally felt like he had some relevancy in the game. And that's what we talked about earlier, man. Like, that's everything. So
yeah. So what advice would you give any young coach looking to get into coaching or, grow in this profession besides special teams?
No, man. Couple things. Check your ego at the door.
Yeah.
You don't know it all. You don't know it all. And the moment you do, there's somebody that will gladly tell you otherwise. Check your ego at the door. Be willing to listen. Be willing to listen and learn. And don't be above anything regarding the game. Learn defense, learn special teams, learn something other than the position that you're really passionate about. If you're an offensive coach, and just like we got done talking about today, if you're an offensive coach and you're a skill position coach and you don't understand offensive line play, you better learn. You better learn quick, because if you ever want to really truly understand how the whole mechanism works, it starts there. Same way on defense. If you're a DB guy and you don't understand run fits and you don't understand how those gaps get fitted, you better learn quickly. And you get out of your comfort zone. Don't if you're a young coach and you're like, man, I just want to coach wide receivers. Now, that's awesome, buddy. That's great. But I'm gonna tell you right now, it don't matter. It don't matter if you may be fantastic in that realm, but you're not going to really help your team. You need to understand how the whole mechanism works and be able to understand how everything gets together. Everything works together on that side of the football. So be a good listener. Take notes. Just get a notebook. If you get an iPad, get your phone out. Anytime a meeting is happening, take notes and find a way to organize those notes to where you can always refer back to it. And because when you're working for a guy, when you've got a guy whose livelihood is dying on that job and he trusted you to help him with that, it's just respectful that you do everything you can to make sure that you're doing the best job you possibly can. And some people may be more talented than me in this aspect, but like, I've got to write it down. I've got to file it away, and I've got to go back and revisit it, and I've got to understand things. And study the game to where you have answers for those kids that have the why. Study what it is that you're like, it sounds silly. I do it all the time. Like it's a double-edged sword. Like it's bad that I have such a long drive to work, but it's also a good thing. I will talk to myself in my car about what it is that I'm going to say to the players in the meeting, just so I'm making sure that I'm on my T's about my message is clear. They are going to be able to understand it. Like, don't just walk in and shoot from the hip. Prepare for everything, a meeting, a drill, everything. Make sure you have a plan for what it is that you want to get accomplished within that time frame of whatever it is you're looking at. And so that's the big organizational piece right there. And probably the last thing I would say, give advice to younger coaches, is that it's kind of twofold here. Like, make sure if you have a significant other that they know what they're getting themselves into.
Oh yeah.
Make sure that you are upfront and honest with them, because and this is probably my tangent here. Like, this game is so important to me, and like, this is everything to me, and I don't run away from that. I don't shy away from that. And my family is also the most important thing to me, and I'm going to make sure that I'm there for them. But I was very upfront and honest by making sure they knew what I was going to be doing and how my process went about this. And so I think that you've got to have that balance as a coach in life, where you can't just be all ball all the time.
Mhm.
You've also got to make sure that you do a good job of setting yourself up for success, because this isn't a hobby, and it shouldn't be treated like a hobby. This isn't some run of the mill 8 to 5 where you just clock in and clock out. I mean, this is important. This is an important thing that you're choosing to get into, and you better show it the respect it deserves, because this game's the real deal, and this profession is the real deal. And I think that you need to do it justice by making sure that you're preemptively setting yourself up for success at home by
Mhm.
making sure that everybody's on the same page as far as like what this game is actually going to require out of you. And that, I think that's something that a lot of times doesn't get thought about, um, so last thing I'd say is have fun. Have fun
Oh
with
yeah.
it. Have fun with it, man. Have fun with it. And that's a constant reminder I have to myself too, is like, have fun with it. It's a game. Go have fun. Have fun with the kids. Talk to them, communicate with them, laugh with them, listen to their terrible jokes, listen to their stories that they should not be telling you. It's okay. Enjoy it, man. Have fun. Laugh about it. It's okay. If a bad play happens, like, laugh about it. It's okay.
Yep.
The sun's gonna rise, and just enjoy the ride, um, but at the same time, also get your ass back to work too. So
There you go. Well, man, listen, I appreciate you sitting down with me, us having this conversation. Again, you are definitely someone that I admire and look up to. I appreciate all the help that you give me. I remember getting there, and you were one of the first people that walked over to me and was like, "Hey, man, you need anything? What can I help you with?" And that always stood out to me, and I just want to say thank you for that. And again, we've got a couple years in front of us where we're still gonna keep doing this thing. So
no doubt. Well,
so
well, thank you for having me on, and I wish you nothing but the best of luck with this thing. I do keep up with it. I watch it when I can. I always enjoy you and your wisdom and things of that nature, and think that you have a lot to offer. And as much as you feel like you've learned from me, I've learned just as much from you. And anytime I get a chance to communicate with somebody that I feel like is on the same wavelength in this world of coaching, I will I'll latch on quickly, because I think that's there's few and far between of people that are actually doing this the right way and doing it for the right reasons. And I'm just glad I get to work next to you every day. So
appreciate that. Tell the people where they can find you at social media handles,
yeah,
all those good things.
that's a great question. Yeah, I think it's at Lance Fendley on Twitter and on Instagram. Yeah, I think it's one of those things. I don't know. I get on them. And I like to retweet all of our stuff that our players do. But usually my posting game is strictly reduced to birthdays of my children or my wife, who, me and your wife have the same thing in common. Like, she married a doctor and I married a doctor, so like me and Jay got a lot in common. You know what I'm saying? So.
There you go. So yeah, go follow Coach Fendley again. At Lance Fendley on X, because I guess that's what everybody calls it now, and no longer Twitter.
Yeah.
And Instagram. Also go follow me on Twitter at One Life to Live, which is the number 1 LYF, the number 2 LIV, and then the number 3. And at Dr. Coach A, also on X and on Instagram. Again, thank you guys for tuning in. This has been another episode of One Life to Live with Dr. Coach A.
Fotier. Just ask for it. Trap dreams for a richer million. I ain't even have to trap for it.